So we're here with Byron Donalds, Florida Congressman, an up-and-coming new, fresh energy in the Congress. And Byron has a great story. Has been very supportive of the Jewish community for quite some time. So first of all, Byron, thanks so much for being here.
No, it's my pleasure to be here.
So many that are watching this would be interested to know that Byron is actually from Crown Heights. He's a Crown Heights native. And I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit about your story growing up in Crown Heights and what sort of shaped the ideology that you currently espouse. What made you into the congressman that you are?
Yeah, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. Grew up in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, Park Place between Troy and Schenectady. That's where I lived. And, my mom she was by herself. We didn't really have money. So, you just learn to persevere. And for her, education was the most important thing. And so she wanted to make sure that I was focused in school and did what I could to get out of the inner city. That was her focus in life. I was, in high school, it was always, you're going to go to college, you're going to go to college. I went to college in Tallahassee, Florida. I went to Florida A&M University, and then I transferred to Florida State, which is also in Tallahassee. And so I graduated from Florida State, moved to Naples, got married, and my career was in finance. So I started in banking, then I moved to insurance, then to financial services. So, my upbringing was really about, working hard, persevering. There are no excuses. Everything that you're going to get, you gotta make it for yourself. Nobody's going to give you anything. And that's what my mother always instilled in me. And then when I got into my career and through my studies in school, that's where I learned about free market capitalism, macroeconomic theory. And so politics, which came later, was really driven by those two first pillars in my life, just perseverance and working hard, not following the crowd, thinking for yourself from my mother, and then free market, laissez-faire capitalism from my career. And, as I started engaging politically, and really started figuring out politics. That really started when I was about 30. Kind of realized I was pretty conservative just in my views and kind of how I lived my life, and the rest is history.
So when you say you became a conservative, what were some of those ideals that really hit you that made you think, oh, I guess I'm a conservative?
It's the financial collapse of '08. And, in '09, in Naples and a lot of cities around the country, that's when the Tea Party rallies were first just starting up. And, I remember, the news media kept saying that these rallies are racist. And they were really just about hating whatever President Obama was doing. And so, I went to one just to see for myself. Like I said, my mother always said, don't follow the crowd, figure things out for yourself. So I was intrigued about what was happening really down the street from my office. And I had lived in Naples for, about by that time, about 6 years. And things from a racial standpoint were always good. Like, I never had any issues or anything like that. So when I heard about this, I was like, man, let me go out there and see what's happening. And when I got there, people were standing for the Constitution. They were standing for not having massive deficits. They didn't want the TARP bailouts, which is something I didn't want either. And so, I met some people there, and I started reading books on political philosophy. Got put onto a book, The Law by Frederick Bastiat, the first book I've ever read. It really spoke to me. And as I started just reading about politics and understanding political philosophy, not modern politics, not Republican Democrat stuff, but political philosophy, that's when I realized I was actually a conservative. And, from then I switched my party from Democrat to Republican and started continuing to get involved in the Tea Party movement, and politics just started becoming more and more a part of my life.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So I wanted to ask you, you grew up in Crown Heights, which is a very religiously oriented place for the Jewish community, a lot of very religious Jews. And one thing I've noticed about you was that over the years, you've been very dedicated to the Jewish community. You've been very pro-Israel, very supportive of Israel, certainly since October 7th, been very vocal about it. Where did this relationship with the Jewish community and with Israel come from? Is this something that, because of your upbringing in Crown Heights, is this something that sort of developed over the years? How did this all kind of come about and come together in your life?
Well, in 2001, I became a born again Christian. Like, I gave my life to Christ when I was 21 years old. And, just being involved in my church before, politics came along, you just would always read, in scripture about, like for Gentiles to be able to stand with Jews and be able to stand for Jews. It was something that it really comes up in Christianity, that being a part of my background as well. In 2019, I actually went to Israel. I was on a trip with APAC. I was over there for about 10 days, and you really get a chance to see all the geography of Israel and why, some of the things we talk about here in the United States, the most common one being two-state solution. But then when you're over there and you're like, wait a minute, how's this actually going to work? How's this thing going to come together? What does this mean about security and peace for the Jewish people? It puts a lot of things into perspective. I was actually I was able to go on that trip because at the time I was in the state legislature. And what APAC was doing is that they would find people who were involved politically, whether it was inside politics or outside politics, and they would want people to come and actually see Israel and get that perspective of being on the ground in Israel. And I think that's actually a good thing, because it's one thing to hear about it on the news. It's another thing to actually have been there and you can see it with your own eyes and really understand all the geography and the issues that come with it. So, my stance of being supportive of Israel, pro-Israel, is really first started. It's seeing it, yeah, but then it's also, just my time, just not even my time, still am today. My Christian beliefs and values. You couple that with understanding what's happening in the world, and like I said, as I was starting to understand politics and then understand political history, you then, of course, you have to understand that relationship of the United States and Israel, how critical of a relationship that has been, really over the past 80 years, why that continues to be at the forefront of American international relationships. So you couple all those things together, the history, you see the geography, the political history, and really those religious ties, then it's really a no-brainer. Being able to stand for Israel, be supportive of Israel, just makes sense. It's just common sense to me.
So when the topic of Israel and our American participation in Israel and Israeli politics comes up, a lot of times, especially when it comes to funding, in Congress, a lot of times the support of Russia, Ukraine, and American support of Israel are kind of like lumped together. Well, if we support Ukraine, if we support Israel, we have to also give in this bill money to Ukraine. Like
Right.
they're like a package deal that you have to take together. How do you see that, and what might be a distinction between the way that the U.S. engages with Israel as opposed to the way that it engages with Ukraine?
A couple of things. One, just politically up here on Capitol Hill, that kind of sausage making, deal making happens a lot. People say it's the art of compromise. That might be true. What I find it to be more is just a way for a lot of things to occur that shouldn't happen, or shouldn't happen to the degree that they're doing. Well, one side wants it, and so people tend to go along. I think that in terms of where the United States is right now, we have to set our priorities. Israel is our number one priority from an international perspective, so they get taken care of first. That's why the House went ahead and passed a $14.3 billion aid package to Israel. And we did put a pay for in it. We want to be fiscally responsible, and we need to start doing that here in the United States, because we don't have unlimited money. Nobody does. And if you want to be able to be helpful to your allies, you got to also make sure you are in a sound financial position so you can continue to be helpful to your allies. And so that's the House's position. It's really unfortunate that led by Senator Chuck Schumer, that Senate Democrats killed that package. They defeated that package in the Senate 2 days ago. That's really unfortunate. So the House, we're going to have to respond in kind, and we will. But I think that's one. I think now with Ukraine, the Ukraine situation, people might say there are similarities. There are some, but not nearly to the level of Israel. And it's that the United States did agree in 1994 to protect Ukrainian sovereignty if it would return its nuclear missiles and nuclear devices back to Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. So there was a Budapest agreement where the United States, and by the way, also Russia, signed to protect Ukrainian sovereignty. So Vladimir Putin is in violation of that agreement. So are there reasons why the United States is going to be involved in Ukraine? Yes, there are. But is it to the degree and the level of priority of Israel? No, it's not.
One of the things you really don't have to look too far since October 7th across the world and even in the United States, in particular on college campuses, is the tremendous rise in anti-Semitism. I wonder, from a congressional standpoint, are there things that Congress can do that you see that Congress can do that would be helpful in sort of quelling the growing strides of anti-Semitism that have come across in this country, particularly on college campuses?
Yeah, there's some things, and we're actually going through that thought process right now. Anything from no federal funds, which is probably the most draconian way, and no federal funds if a university or colleges are accepting money from pro-Hamas groups to support these issues on college campuses, even down to, which I think is much more of a state issue than a federal issue, support of security for Israeli students and Jewish students on campus. The growth of anti-Semitism, though, is a real concern, because what's unfortunately occurring on a lot of campuses is this moral relativism that is being taught. And so that basically says that these atrocities are okay because of perceived issues from the past. And that's just not true. It's never been true. It's not okay, no matter what we're talking about going on in world history, American history, or global history. It's just not okay. And so I think that what we're seeing, though, is a backlash against a lot of universities and colleges because of this. You have parents who are now saying, I'm not sending my son or daughter to Cornell or to Harvard or to any of the Ivy League schools because they don't want their children to participate in some of this propaganda and or indoctrination that's occurring on college campuses. Part of it is also from a security standpoint. They're not trying to put their child in harm's way. I think that the number one way, and this is going to be tough to actually defeat a lot of this, is people need to stand up. College students have to be able to have steel in their spine to reject the nonsense that's occurring on these campuses. University presidents, boards of trustees, they need to have enough courage to stand against this anti-Semitism, which is unfolding on their campuses. University faculty, they have to have enough courage to be able to actually see right from wrong and then make those determinations accordingly. I think in the halls of Congress, people will say, well, why is it taking so long for DC to respond? I mean, well, number one, going from idea to actual legislation that can pass a chamber is a process. It's a tough one. And I think that even though you see in these issues, Congress does have a responsibility to be very deliberate and diligent about how it decides to craft new law, because you don't want to create an opening that causes more problems in the future on other fronts. So we have that responsibility. Number two, just talking directly to you, the White House, I just don't think they're interested in doing anything. They'll pay lip service, they'll talk about it, but they'll do nothing concrete. Because this wave of anti-Semitism, which has been there for a while, this is deep-seated in the Democrat Party. It's one of the reasons why the Israeli aid package was defeated by Senate Democrats. Well, every Senate Democrat voted against it. Every Senate Republican voted for it. That was defeated in the Senate because of the same issue they're having in their political base with respect to anti-Semitism.
So I mean that's discouraging. I guess it is what it is. If there's one issue that at least both sides could play service to and come together on, would be Israel and being against anti-Semitism. And I hope that we can still have that. And I want to kind of pivot to like a broader question about the division that we find in government nowadays. I mean, I tend to think that the politicians and the media are dividing us, that they are more divided than the average American person, the average American citizen. You talk to people at work, I mean, whatever, you mostly get along. You kind of focus on the things that either don't talk politics, or you just kind of focus on things that you can agree on and move on from there. But in many ways, it feels from where people are feeling, they feel like we've never been more divided in our lifetime, and feel like everything is sort of moving in an even farther and farther away direction, where we're completely disconnected and disjointed from each other. I always like to kind of remind people that, well, it's not the most divided we've ever been. We did fight a civil war. I mean, that turned family against family. And so we're not the most divided, but it certainly seems, at least in the political sphere and the media sphere, that we're living in two different and two diverging paths. How do you see the future? I mean, I don't want my kids to grow up in a place where you don't talk to your friend or neighbor because they have different politics than you. It seems like a crummy way to projection for the future. How are you seeing the future, and how we can come together as Americans? What's your take?
Well, I mean, you raise a good question. I think that, politics has its seasons like anything else in life. I think the vitriolic season of politics is probably coming to an end. I say all the time that politics, it really does run downstream from where people are. And I think as people begin to realize that, not talking to your cousin because you're whoever your cousin supported, it's just not a standard that, the country can survive. I think part of that's going to be political leadership going forward, where, yeah, you can talk to, as a Republican, you can talk to Democrats and try to work with each other on some bills or some policy items. That doesn't mean that, you're the worst person in the world, while at the same time maintaining your principle set of what's non-negotiable for you. And I think that's coming. I think that you're starting to see some of that already begin. I think it's going to grow. But the biggest thing is going to be culture. I think, for young people, when I talk with them and they say, well, how do I deal with somebody who just vehemently disagrees with me? And I said, you got to engage them. Like, you got to spend time finding somewhere that you can find common ground. It doesn't have to be politics. It could be sports. It could be music. It could be art. It could be entertainment, just somewhere where that person is viewed as a human being, as an American. And then from there, you can build and try to find ways to deal with political disagreements. And if there's no way to deal with the political disagreements, that's what elections are for. That's why we're a constitutional republic, because there are disagreements. And so what you have to find a way is that we're not just a pure majority. We're not a pure democracy. We are a republic that makes sure that all views are represented. And it's not perfect, never going to be perfect, but it's the best model ever created. And I think that's key. I think we're going to go through this, but I think people want to be family members again. I think people want to be able to be friends again. And in some respects, go back to what used to be, where, it was a time where politics was taboo. You never talked about politics. You only went to go vote, and then you went back to life. And I think that politics has actually been a part of a fabric of everything that we've done. And I actually think that what's happening now is the country is moving into a place where there's a happy medium, where, yes, we do talk about political issues and we do it openly, but at the same time, it's not the number one driver of how we view each other. And I think we're moving to that. I think it's going to be part leadership, and it's going to be part just as people desiring that. And I think it's going to make for, a more perfect union.
Well, from your mouth to God's ears is all I can say. I tend to agree with you. I tend to be optimistic about how things are going to go going forward. I mean, some issues I look at, it's like, this is not going anywhere fast. But as a whole, I think that the average American does not want to be fighting and disjointed from their family members and neighbors. I hope that to be the case. I feel a certain degree of optimism about the future and where we're headed collectively. And just want to say thank you for all the good work that you do, and thank you for joining us today and sharing with us your perspective, and look forward to talking sometime in the near future as well.
Of course, listen, anytime. Thanks for having me on.